Pursuant to the order of reference from the House on December 10th, 2020, the committee is continuing its study of Bill C-8, an act to amend the Citizenship Act, Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's Call to Action, number 94. And joining us, I welcome officials from Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada who are with us to answer questions members may have about the content of the bill, and perhaps questions from the chair as well. So I would like to provide members of the committee with some instructions and a few comments on how the committee will proceed with the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-8 in this hybrid meeting format. As the name indicates, it's an examination of all of the clauses in the order in which they appear on the bill. So I will call each clause successively, and each clause is subject to debate and a vote. If there are amendments to the clause in question, I will recognize the member proposing it, who may explain it. The amendment will then be open for debate, and when no further members wish to intervene, then the amendment will be voted on. Amendments will be considered in the order in which they appear in the bill or the package each member received from the clerk. Members should note that the amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk of the committee or by email for members participating virtually. Since this is the committee's first clause-by-clause consideration of a bill in a hybrid meeting format, I'll be going slowly to allow members to follow the proceedings properly, as well as accommodating my own procedure through the process. Amendments have been given an alphanumeric number in the top corner to indicate which party submitted them. There is no need for a seconder to move an amendment. Once moved, you will need unanimous consent to withdraw it. During the debate on an amendment, members are permitted to move sub-amendments. These sub-amendments must be submitted in writing or by email from members participating virtually. They do not require the approval of the mover of the amendment. Only one sub-amendment may be considered at a time, and that sub-amendment cannot be amended. When a sub-amendment is moved to an amendment, it is voted on first, then another sub-amendment may be moved, or the committee may consider the main amendment and then vote on it. Once every clause has been voted on, the committee will vote on the title and the bill itself, and an order to reprint the bill may be required if amendments are adopted, so that the House has a proper copy for use at the report stage. And finally, the committee will have to order the chair to report the bill to the House. That report contains only the text of any adopted amendments, as well as an indication of any deleted clauses. Thank you all for your attention, and let's hope for a productive clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-8. Now, I'd like to pose a question for my own enlightenment. On Schedule 1 of the agenda, there is a note that if the Bloc Québécois 1 is adopted, then the following two NDP amendments cannot be moved. So could I have an explanation of what that entails?
Yes, it's Émilie Thivierge speaking, the legislative clerk this morning. So what's happening is that BQ1, BQ2, as well as the two amendments from the NDP are seeking to amend the same line. And even though the schedule is not, there's no number in the line in the schedule, there are still lines, so the same applies as in any clause in the bill. So that's why if one amendment is adopted, the other ones couldn't be moved because the bill is the schedule is going to be amended and it just wouldn't make sense to amend it again. And as well as I said, as in any other bill, once a line has been amended in a bill, it cannot be further amended. So it can only be amended once. That's why if either one of the 4 amendments is adopted, the other ones cannot be moved.
Thanks very much. We all have these temporary glitches with the mic switches and so on. So I think I'm on and appreciate that explanation. Thank you very much. As we move on now, members of the committee, to clause number 1. And shall clause number 1 carry? Any discussion? Therefore, Mr. Anand Sangri, do you have any?
No, Mr. Chair, I think, do we need to move this or can we just keep going forward? I move that we carry clause number 1.
All in favor?
Sorry, Bob, can you clarify what is clause number 1? Is it the first paragraph? I'm not sure what you're...
Mr. Clerk, can you give an explanation?
Yes, so in the bill, on page 1, we have 2 clauses. So there's the preamble. So we should say that pursuant to the standing order 75-1, the consideration of the preamble is always postponed. So it will be voted on at the end. So we move to clause 1, which is right under Citizenship Act. So that's clause 1. And then we have the second clause, that's the coming into force. And then we'll have the schedule, which includes the text of the oath.
Okay. And quite right, I skipped through my script. Pursuant to Standing Order 75-1, consideration of the preamble is postponed. We will get to that. But if you have the bill before you, Schedule 1, Mr. Pulowski says the schedule to the Citizenship Act is replaced by the schedule set out in the schedule to this act, and that is what we consider right now. So if we're all in favor of that, we can move on. Shall clause 1 carry? Seeing no opposition, we'll call that carried. Now we go to clause 2. Coming into force is the title of the clause on the bill. Shall clause 2 carry? The statement once again is day after royal assent, this act comes into force on the day after the day on which it receives royal assent. And that's what we're considering now. Do we have any opposition to that? Then clause 2 shall carry. Now, Schedule 1, and I have the BQ1, the block proposal, the amendment, and I will recognize Madame Normandin, s'il vous plaît, please.
Pardon, mille excuses.
Excuse me. For the blocks amendment, you see what my arguments are going to be. I will repeat, but I will do so briefly. I would like to repeat for those members who were not at previous meetings. So, I want to remind you that Bloc Québécois is in favor of the spirit and the goal of Bill C-8 to recognize the rights of Aboriginal peoples and also to have an aspect of education for new citizens when they take the oath. The Bloc Québécois has always been in favor of promoting the rights of Indigenous people. We've always presented ourselves as allies for Indigenous peoples. And before the signature of UNDRIP, Bloc Québécois in 2004 in Geneva participated in a working group. The Bloc Québécois was there and supported to make sure that the United Nations would recognize the rights of Indigenous people. And we did the same to have Indigenous rights recognized by the international community. And we went at the UN General Assembly to say so. When Canada decided to vote against or expressed the will to vote against UNDRIP, the Bloc Québécois made representations to make sure that Canada would sign the declaration, and that happened in 2010. For C8, the goal is to have new citizens recognize the rights of Indigenous people, not only their history. And of course, there is an educational aspect. But we have to remind ourselves that there are some who will be Quebecers. So with the current language, we would ask them to recognize something that Quebec itself has never recognized, the Constitution by the Constitution Act of 1982. Professor Cardinal explained the difference in C8. There is a little mistake that has to be corrected because it refers to the Act of 1982. So we would ask to future Quebec citizens to recognize the Constitution, which no Quebec government of any party has ever recognized. So we need to ask the question, is the mention of the Constitution necessary in this bill and in this oath? If we go back to testimonies of First Nations leaders, nobody said that the addition of Constitution was not absolutely necessary, that it was interesting, and this word was not included in the Call for Action 94 and the original intention of changing the oath. Chief Poitras said that she would have felt okay about having the same text, the same language as used by the commissioners and in the Call for Action 94. So the mention of the Constitution is not absolutely necessary in the oath or affirmation of citizenship. I think it's even a mistake to mention it or useless. Professor Cardinal said that the language of the oath, as it read, recognizes the Constitution, but does not recognize explicitly the rights. So we recognize the Constitution, which includes the rights, but not necessarily the rights. I'd like to quote Professor Cardinal, who said, if we want to be fully consistent with the concept of reconciliation and the nation-to-nation relationship, it would be better to remove any mention of the Constitution and simply directly have a solemn promise to respect and ancestral and treaty rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. So our proposal, our motion, basically puts the oath back on track.
In this version, we have added something, and it is the recognition of inherent rights. I would quote Professor Cardinal again. I asked him what inherent rights were, and he explained. He didn't define them as such, but he did say that they were pre-existing rights. Inherent rights exist independently of recognition by the state or by the Constitution. So for Indigenous people, that is extremely important, because before Europeans arrived here and created New France and eventually Canada, there had been people on this land for thousands of years. That was a very organized society, and it had an organic law as such. It had a society. So to represent the structure of Indigenous laws, they are not covered by the Canadian Constitution, which is based on Canadian standards. There is pre-existing laws that pre-exist the sovereignty of the Crown, and those rights have not been completely recognized by Canada, but increasingly by the Constitution Act of 1982, as well as by other statutes and court decisions. These are inherent rights. It was not the Royal Proclamation that conferred rights upon Indigenous people. That was long believed, but it is not so. The rights of Indigenous people existed before the sovereign power of the Crown came into being. Professor Cardinal also pointed out that recognition of Indigenous rights through the Constitution Act of 1982 is a promise that has not been completely fulfilled. So I asked him whether he could give me any examples. He said that there were, for many nations, still negotiations underway. They are still waiting to have their rights recognized by the state. And in the interpretation of Section 35 of the Constitution Act, that the scope of that article, that section, has been restricted by the Supreme Court. So I would submit that recognition of the Constitution without specific recognition of Indigenous rights is incomplete. In conclusion, therefore, I would call on my colleagues to vote for the Bloc Québécois amendment for two reasons. In one of my questions, I asked whether the defense of Indigenous rights was in fact the defense of all nations, including those of minorities in Quebec. The point of this is to recognize the rights of nations, since it enshrines the rights of nations. But the current wording of C8 sets aside a part of history. It ignores a part of history, that of the Quebec nation. So by voting for C8 in its current form, I fear that we would end up eroding the major principle of recognizing nations as nations. And I believe that recognition, the recognition of the rights of nations, should be at the core of this bill, should be at the heart of the oath. The other reason for which I would invite my colleagues to vote for the Bloc Québécois amendment is this. As Chief Poitras indicated, in the spirit of reconciliation, it is important for the purpose of C8 to be unanimous, to be adopted unanimously. It would send a strong message for reconciliation. So I'm holding out an olive branch to my colleagues. By agreeing to this amendment, they would ensure that we could unanimously vote for this bill, which, because all too many die on the order paper. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Madame Normandin. The raise hand function will assist me. There was a raised hand from Gary and Sangari. Gary, please go ahead.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank Madame Normandin for her her intervention. I do, want to note that the work that the bloc has done on UNDRIP, and I hope to get the support of the bloc. We're hoping to get their support as we move C-15 through the House and this committee. I do, without getting into a prolonged constitutional discussion, I just want to put on the record the importance of having this word within C8, the Term Constitution Act of 1982. It is very important in the sense that it does recognize some very specific rights of Indigenous people. It's defined in Section 35. It is also a document. Bill C8 is a document that had consultation through a number of different Indigenous organizations as well as peoples, and we believe that this is an important outlet to reaffirm the importance of the Constitution and the constitutional rights of Indigenous people that's enshrined therein. And then I probably will stop there. We are going to be opposing the amendment, and while we appreciate the suggestions put forward by Ms. Normandin, I do think it's an important element to incorporate into a citizenship oath.
Further comment? Okay, so members of the committee, I'm going to refer to the block amendment as BQ1. Shall BQ1 carry? All in favor? Show me your hand.
Monsieur le Président, est-ce qu'il est possible de...
Mr. Chairman, would it be possible to have a recorded vote?
It's accepted by the chair. So, Mr. Clerk.
So, the vote is on BQ1. Shall BQ1 carry? Mr. Anandasangari?
No.
Ms. Shanahan?
No.
Mr. Pawlowski?
No.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Ms. Zan?
No.
Ms. McLeod?
No.
Mr. Melillo?
No.
Mr. Vidal?
No.
Ms. Dancho?
No.
Madame Normandin?
Oui.
Ms. Kwan?
No.
Nays 5. Excuse me. Nays 10. Yeas 1. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So that is lost. And Madame Normandin, you have a further amendment to bring forward.
Merci. Je serai beaucoup plus...
Yes, thank you. I'll be much briefer in my comments on this one, since everything that I said for my first amendment would apply pretty much word for word to my second amendment. That's all I need to say.
Thank you. Would the mover accept on division the results based on the previous vote?
Oui,
So,
Monsieur le Président.
Ms. Dancho, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to put a few quick remarks on the record for the amendment. I know the two amendments are similar. I just want to note that I appreciate the bloc's our MP Normandin's remarks very much, and I noticed in her remarks, in the opening of her remarks, she mentioned that the bloc recognizes the rights of Indigenous people, and one of the concerns we had with her amendments was that they actually take out the words recognize, and affirm, which our understanding are they're quite symbolic words for the Indigenous peoples. And she said them herself in her remarks. So that was one of our concerns with that, and we just thought that that language was very important to include. So that's why we'll be opposing. That's one of the reasons we'll be opposing the amendment.
Thanks, Ms. Dancho. Mr. Pawlowski and Ms. Kwan had hands up. Mr. Pawlowski, first of all.
I'd like to appreciate and say I understand where the block's coming from. Of course, they will not want reference to the Constitution in there. However, they fought the good battle. They tried. I hope they might reconsider when it comes to the vote and give this this bill support, because I think it is important that all parties agree on it. It would be a nice gesture on their part. Thanks.
Ms. Kwan, did you want to add to this, or are you waiting for your speaking opportunity?
I'll just be very quick, Mr. Chair, just to say that I do have amendments to the bill as well, with language that incorporates the AFN's suggestion, which I think then provides both aspects, and so therefore I will be voting against this motion. But I do appreciate the work that Ms. Normandin has done and appreciate her point.
Ms. Normandin, something further?
Simplement, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, thank you to my colleagues for their kind words on all the work that we have done. To follow up on what Ms. Dancho said, had she suggested a sub-amendment to include recognition and confirmation of rights, recognition and affirmation, that would have been a friendly amendment that we would, of course, have agreed to.
Once again, accepting the results of the previous vote, the proposal, the second amendment is turned down. And we go now to the New Democratic Party's amendment. Ms. Kwan, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will, I think everybody's got a copy of the amendment, right? So do I need to read that out, or everybody's got a copy of it, so I don't need to read it out? Effectively, I'll just highlight the language that's being added to the proposed language in the bill. And it basically adds this language, including the inherent rights and titles of, and the treaties and agreements with First Nations, the rights and agreements with Inuit and Métis peoples, and then it goes on to the part about the Constitution. This language was proposed actually by the AFN from the committee's work, and subsequent to that, I also canvassed with other witnesses to see whether or not they would support this language, and those witnesses who responded indicated that they would support this. I think it is important for the citizenship oath to put emphasis as well as to highlight the inherent rights and titles as indicated by the AFN. As a newcomer, it is important for them to understand both the language, I think, in the Constitution and what preceded the Constitution and the historical rights. And that's the reason why I have proposed this amendment. I hope the committee members will support it in moving forward.
Thanks very much, Ms. Kwan. Ms. McLeod, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. And, in respect to what is a co-development process, which I know that the NDP have indicated that, through UNDRIP, that legislation, especially legislation that directly impacts Indigenous peoples, needs to be co-developed and put forward. So I think, in spite of the AFN indicating some, thoughts around a language change, we do have other, organizations, peoples, and of course the AFN being an advocacy group, but does not have rights in their own sense. So, I think to move these kinds of motions at this stage of the game, I think is actually contrary to the, the process that has been put in place, whereby, as I say, engagement with ITK, Métis, First Nations has got us to this stage. So certainly we would not be supporting the amendment at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Normandin and then Mr. Ananda Sangari. Ms. Normandin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move a sub-amendment. Do I go ahead?
Is permitted at this point, right?
Oui, Madame Normandin, vous pouvez.
Yes, Ms. Normandin, you can indeed submit a sub-amendment, but it would be excellent if you had the written version and if you could send it to the clerk. Thank you. I will dictate it. It's fairly simple, and we can send you the written version soon. After the words First Nations, I would delete title rights and the Constitution, which recognizes and affirms, and I would replace it by and. So the sub-amendment would read, I swear or affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada, including the inherent rights of First Nations and the Aboriginal and treaty rights of First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples, and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen. If that sub-amendment were adopted, I would be very happy to support my colleague Ms. Kwan's amendment.
Speak to the sub-amendment. You had your hand up.
I wish to speak to the actual amendment itself, but substantively it's the same issue. We believe that we have consulted extensively on C8. I appreciate the Ms. Kwan bringing the original amendment forward. I do note that her concerns about newcomers, especially understanding treaty rights, is already covered in the oath as presented. This C8 does represent the work of many different stakeholders who've come forward and who've given input, and at this stage, we believe that Ms. Kwan's amendment does not necessarily reflect we understand the intention, but doesn't necessarily reflect the consensus that was built throughout the process of developing this legislation.
Ms. Kwan, you're next. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Speaking to the sub-amendment, I will unfortunately not be supporting the sub-amendment. I actually do think it's really important to recognize title rights. Many of the court cases that we have seen centers around the acknowledgement of title rights and or lack thereof. And just relying on the Constitution, I also think is deficient, to be honest. And if we're going to be true to the history of Indigenous peoples and their rights, I actually do think that adopting the language as proposed by the AFN is essential. And so therefore, it should be recognition of both inherited rights and title rights as well.
Thanks, Ms. Kwan. I'm going to go to the legislative clerk for a comment now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Madame Normandin, on voulait...
Ms. Normandin, we wanted to make sure right now the amendment moved by Ms. Kwan is the one with reference number 11087213, because I followed what you said, but it doesn't work with the amendment that is currently being studied. So I think that your comment refers to the following amendment that is supposed to be moved by Ms. Kwan. So if you want to move a sub-amendment to this one, but right now, what you are reading right now is not about the amendment that we are debating right now, the one that ends with 213. You are absolutely right. I apologize. I can write a sub-amendment similar to the one that I read for this amendment.
La même façon.
Thank you. So we will go back to the amendment itself. Ms. Kwan, you made your comments. Anything further before we put it to the committee?
Just to say, if we could get a recorded vote, please.
Mr. Clerk, would you record a vote on the NDP amendment, First Amendment?
On a point of order, Mr. Chair, is it are we voting on the sub amendment as going to be presented by Ms. Normandin, or we're not doing the sub amendment at this point?
No,
on this particular amendment brought forward by Ms. Kwan.
We've agreed that the sub amendment wasn't appropriate to this current amendment, so we reversed back to the amendment itself, not the sub amendment. And the clerk has we've asked the clerk to do a recorded vote.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
So the vote is on NDP amendment. Those in favor will say yay, and those opposed, nay. Mr. Nandasangari?
No.
Ms. Shanahan?
No.
Mr. Pulaski?
Sorry, no.
Mr. Vancouverden?
No.
Ms. Zan?
No.
Ms. McLeod?
No.
Mr. Melillo?
No.
Mr. Vidal?
No.
Ms. Dancho?
No.
Madame Normandin?
Non.
Ms. Kwan?
Yes.
Nays 10, yeas 1. Mr. Chair?
Thank you. So the vote is lost, and once again, the sub-amendment was ruled, I rule it out of order. And so we move on now to the second amendment offered by Ms. Kwan. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the second amendment is a simpler version, but then again, it simply acknowledges the inherent rights of First Nations and title rights. And so the language being added to the proposed C8 language is this. After the words that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada, including, and so I'm adding these words, the inherent rights of First Nations, title rights, and then it goes on to talk about the Constitution. So it simply just acknowledges the fact that they do have inherent rights and title rights.
I have Mr. Pulaski. Go ahead, please.
I think with respect to the NDP, I think in the Sparrow decision, the whole kind of decision was based on the fact that they recognized inherent rights, in this case fishing, as being part of the rights which were protected under Section 35. So I don't think that has to be in there. So thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Pulaski. Madame Normandin.
Sans surprise.
This is not going to be a surprise. I will be moving a sub-amendment. I would take out including the inherent rights of First Nation, titled rights. And there is a error in translation because you can't say découlant du titre in French.
Mr. Clerk, could you comment on that reference?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Madame Normandin, ce serait possible?
Ms. Normandin, would it be possible to read the oath with your sub-amendments? What would it look like? I think it would be clearer. I swear or affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, and that I will faithfully observe the laws of Canada, including the inherent rights of First Nations and Aboriginal and treaty rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and fulfill my duties as a Canadian citizen.
Mr. Ananda Sangari.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to register the same concerns I had with the previous amendment. Again, thanking Ms. Kwan for bringing this forward, but both the sub-amendment and the amendment we will be voting against.
So we'll start with, if there are no further comments, on the sub-amendment. Ms. Kwan, you have your hand up. Do you want to speak before we take a vote? You're on mute. On mute.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry, my computer sometimes is less sensitive than I think. Just speaking very quickly to the sub-amendments, the same reasons as I stated earlier, but to the points around inheritance rights and title rights that Mr. Polsky and Mr. Sangari had raised. I just think that the issue is, of course, is that Indigenous peoples, First Nations peoples have always had to take the matters to court to get clarity. And then, even then, as we saw on the situation with the dispute around the fishing rights, is a prolonged process that does not have clear indication of action from the government. If we're going to educate newcomers about Indigenous history and the rights of First Nations, I actually do think explicitly saying that they do have inheritance rights and titles is essential. And so, so to that point, and that's why I think the language, as I propose, is being put forward.
I'm going to ask the legislative clerk to comment.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Bonjour, Madame Normandin. I'm the other legislative clerk. Juste une question pour vous, Madame Normandin.
Madame Normandin, question for you. You want to change the oath only or the affirmation? Because you would need to move a sub-amendment to the affirmation as well. Well, I can do it, but it would be the same. Yes, of course, I can move a sub-amendment, and I understand that the same arguments will be put forward for sure.
Okay, so I need some help on how we'll proceed with sub-amendments. We have added a sub-amendment, and I believe we have to deal with the first one. So, Mr. Clerk, can you advise?
Mr. Chair, since the two sub-amendments have to work together, one cannot live without the other, the vote on the first one would apply to the other.
Okay. So at this point, then, we'll take the vote on the sub-amendment, the first sub-amendment, and just on division, all in favor of the sub-amendment. Go ahead.
Monsieur le Président, je demanderai
I would like to ask for a recorded vote, Mr. Chair, please.
Entitlement, and so, Mr. Clerk.
The vote is on the sub-amendment proposé par Madame Normandin.
as moved by Mrs. Normandin?
No.
Ms. Shanahan,
No.
Mr. Pulaski,
Je regrette, mais non.
Sorry, but no.
No.
Ms. Zan,
No.
Ms. McLeod,
No.
Mr. Melillo,
No.
Mr. Vidal,
No.
Ms. Dancho,
No.
Madame Normandin,
Oui.
Ms. Kwan,
No.
nays 10, yea.
Non. 10, oui, 1. Monsieur le Président?
Yes. Who's? Go ahead, please.
Was nays 10, yeas 1 on the sub-amendment and consequential second sub-amendment.
So have we dealt with the matter of the sub-amendments and can now move to the amendment?
Correct.
And so on the amendment, Ms. Kwan, I'm sorry, Ms. Normandin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Rapidement sur l'amendement de ma collègue.
On my colleague's amendment, I agree that it's important to add inherent rights. We had done that in our amendment, but unfortunately, because the Constitution is mentioned, I will have to vote against.
Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sangari actually mentioned about the consultation process, as did Ms. McLeod. I requested through the committee from the officials the list of stakeholders to which they consulted, and I also asked for a list of the groups that led to the difference in the suggested language in the TRC calls for action number 94 and versus the language proposed under Bill C8. Of course, the information that was provided to all committee members came eventually yesterday, and it only provided the list of the stakeholder groups. As you can see from that list, after 5 years of consultation, it is a very small list. I was quite taken aback, truth be told, with the the level of consultation that the government might have embarked on with this important bill. And then the question that was asked about the groups that led to the differences with the language, there was no answer with respect to that. And then we heard from the committee, where the committee took it upon themselves to invite a variety of people to the table. NWAC, for example, indicated that they were never consulted by the government on this. I asked specifically, for example, to NWAC whether or not they would support language in terms of the amendment, as I indicated earlier, and they said yes. The witnesses all indicated, the importance of recognizing inherent rights and title. And so, anyway, that is the reason why I think that this amendment is important, and in a reduced language as proposed by the AFN, and it's just simply to acknowledge inherent rights and titles actually existed with Indigenous peoples.
Thanks, Ms. Kwan. I appreciate your intervention. I think there has been a consultation process. We are at the point that we are today. The First Nations are eager, I think, to get a response from this committee and have the bill move on through its normal process. So I'm going to ask that we now vote on your amendment. And if you would like a recorded vote, we can do that. What's
Yes,
your preference?
please.
Okay.
Yes, please record a vote.
Mr. Clerk.
The vote is on the amendment proposed by Ms. Kwan. Mr. Anandasangri.
No.
Ms. Shanahan.
No.
Mr. Pawlowski.
Sorry, no.
Mr. Vancouverden.
No.
Ms. Zan.
No.
Ms. McLeod.
No.
Mr. Melillo.
No.
Mr. Vidal.
No.
Ms. Dancho.
No.
Madame Normandin.
No.
Ms. Kwan.
Yes.
Nays 10, yeas 1, Mr. Chair.
So the amendment is lost. And now, members of the committee, we get to the actual oath or affirmation, which is noted as the schedule. And we'll take a recorded vote. I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on the oath or affirmation of citizenship. Prior to that, are there any further comments anyone would like to make? Seeing none.
Sorry, just this is clause. Which clause are you asking for the vote on at this point?
Well, we're through the clause study and we're down to the actual schedule as which is the oath itself.
Okay, so you're asking for a vote on schedule.
Now let me ask the clerk to make sure that I've got my agenda correctly in order.
Yes, that's right. We're at the schedule, and whether or not there's a recorded vote or it's on division or simply carried is what we need to determine.
Have a hand up before we go to the vote. Ms. Kwan, are you speaking further or are we ready to go?
Yeah, just very quickly to say that I'll be supporting the language as proposed by Bill C8, although I do prefer and would have preferred that had one of my amendments would have passed. I think it is important to get on with it. It's only taken 5 years. This is the third bill. I've indicated to Mrs. Sangari in a different occasion that it was always my intention to move forward with Calls to Action number 94, and that was something that the New Democrats supported long ago. And prior to this, in fact, former MP Romeo Saganash and myself had actually written to the predecessors of the current ministers offering our support in moving forward with this. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll go to the vote itself. It's a recorded vote. Mr. Clerk, please.
Sure. The vote is on the schedule for C8. Mr. Anandasangri.
Yes.
Ms. Shanahan.
Yes.
Mr. Pawlowski.
Yes.
Mr. Vancouverden.
Yes.
Ms. Zan.
Yes.
Ms. McLeod.
Yes.
Mr. Melillo.
Yes.
Mr. Vidal.
Yes.
Ms. Dancho.
Yes.
Madame Normandin.
No.
Ms. Kwan.
Yes.
Yeas 10, nays 1, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. The schedule carries. And further business on this matter, the preamble. Shall the preamble carry? Is there any discussion around the preamble? All in favor of the preamble? Hands up would be good. We don't need to record, I don't think. Everyone, thank you very much. So the preamble does carry. Shall the title carry? Mr. Pawlowski, this is what we do. We have to approve the title. And so we have. I declare that passed. And shall the bill as amended carry?
Mr. Chair, I must interrupt. The bill has not been amended, so it would be just shall the bill carry.
Shall the bill carry? and not as amended, and the bill does carry. One negative shake of the head. Okay, thank you. And now shall the chair report the bill to the House? Hands up. And I believe that we have concurrence with that. And with regard to a reprint of the bill, Mr. Clerk, is that a requirement?
Nope.
Well, members of the committee, we've reached an historic moment, and I'm very happy, except perhaps with the lack of unanimity, but nevertheless, we're able to move on forward. And I want to really thank our legislative staff too for assisting me and all of us through this process. And once again, thanks so much. We'll, I believe, attach our names to something significant, and that's much appreciated.
Mr. Chair, if I may just thank our the staff here from IRCC for their assistance and for being here today.
Certainly may. Thank you, everybody. We do have a little bit of business left to do, ladies and gentlemen. And that is on committee business. And I'm not sure we need the legislative staff to hang on if you have other work to do. I think we can get through this just fine. First of all, I need to approve the project budget and the amount requested of $1,650. Is anyone opposed to that? I don't see anyone in opposition, so we'll say that's approved.
Certainly I have no opposition, Chair, but I'd be very curious to do a comparison year over year in terms of our virtual hybrid model in the general committee costs. I expect they're significantly down. We have lost some benefit in that process, but it would be kind of interesting at some point that we engage in that kind of dialogue, whether it is through our committee or more broadly. Thank you.
So that's a very good point, and it probably applies to many other items of parliamentary business. So I think we can work through that as well. I also need to have approval, members of the committee, of the draft work plan for our committee, and that some dates are on the document that I have off because of the obvious reason things have moved around. So is there any opposition to the work plan that we have already discussed? And seeing none, I would, Mr. Ananda Sangari.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I must have missed the document. Which plan are we referring to? Are you referring to?
We have is, Mr. Clerk.
If I may, it's an updated version of the Food Security in Northern Communities work plan to reflect meetings held in late December and the one witness we heard earlier in January.
Sorry, was that sent this morning, Mr. Clerk, or was that from earlier?
I believe yesterday or the day before, and I will resend it to your personal email now.
Great. And then if we are going to be talking about witnesses, should we be going in camera, or are we able to continue the conversation here?
That would be entirely up to the committee.
But what? Oh no, I didn't. No, yeah.
So my understanding is if we are going to be talking about witnesses, then usually it's an in camera. But I'm open to other committee members.
We have a list of witnesses for each panel. Would there be anything, Mr. Clerk, that would be contentious in the people who are listed as witnesses?
I can ask the analyst to comment on that. And in response to Mr. Ananda Sangari, it is typical for committees to hold such discussions in camera.
This is basically the same work plan that the community considered in December of last year. The only difference is that one of the witnesses appeared last week.
So the witnesses scheduled are representative of the submissions from all of the parties?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Hernandez Angry, would you like to suspend for a moment and go over that?
If we may, Mr. Chair, just maybe 5 minutes, and I do propose we go in camera.
It's fine. I'm just wondering whether you wanted to quickly peruse a message that the clerk can send you with regard to this, or should we just suspend and go in camera and work it over?
Yeah, I think while we go in camera, I'll be able to look at this.
Okay, so meeting will be suspended for 5 minutes. Thank you.
you.